guidance that moves lives forward.
Hi, I'm Wendy, and my co-host Daniel and I are talking about why divorce doesn't suck. Our podcast is all about the life you can live and how you can thrive after divorce. You'll hear regular people's stories of divorce and how they reinvented themselves and grew after divorce. You will also hear from experts in the field of marriage and family, sex and relationship coaches, lawyers, and so much more. You will learn lots of great tips on dating from both people who lived it and thrived, and also dating coaches who will share their advice about how to get it right and also how to have fun. We get real here at Divorce Doesn't Suck. Join us in this conversation and the community we're building to help heal and thrive after divorce, because really, divorce doesn't suck.
This episode is brought to you in part by the Cuda Law Firm, guidance that moves lives forward.
Welcome to another episode of Divorce Doesn't Suck. I'm Wendy Sloane with my co-host Daniel Harold. Daniel, how are you today?
I am great. How are you, Wendy? We got a juicy one today.
These such a juicy one. These are words that I didn't even know about before I went through my divorce. And then up until now, as we serve this community, you hear it all the time. Gaslighting, narcissist behaviors. Like, I didn't even know these words existed or what they were. We're going to be talking all about that today and ways to help people deal with that. What about you, Daniel? Have you ever heard of? Were you aware of those words?
And I feel like, number one, I still don't understand the definitions of the words, like gaslighting. I've heard it a lot. I kind of know what it is, but I'm not certain. And number two is, I definitely feel like terms like narcissist is overused, and it'd be nice to kind of break that down and really understand what is it. Because I feel like someone that's truly a narcissist versus others that are just accused of it because they're, a jerk. There's a big difference there. There's a wide gap between the behaviors that you see that can be diagnosed versus someone that's just not easy to deal with. So that would be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, and how do you know if somebody is a real narcissist? We're going to find out all about that. So this is our 7th, it's hard to believe, of our 12-part series, Mapping Your New Path Forward, with attorney Melissa Needle of Needle Cuda Divorce and Family Law. So our topic today, we're going to talk about extreme personalities and aggravating factors. We're going to find out about them and so much more. Welcome back, Melissa Needle.
Thank you. Good morning, both Daniel and Wendy. How are you guys today?
We're great. And I'm sure these are like terms that you were listening in on that you guys use every day.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's very interesting because I feel like these mental health terms like borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder and gaslighting, those terms are bantered around quite a bit, especially in the divorce arena. And so I'm glad that I have this opportunity to sort of explain what they are, explain the challenges that exist if you are divorcing a spouse who has one of these mental illnesses.
And when did these terms really come about, to your recollection?
Typically, what will happen is in the initial interview, when you're getting to know your client and they're explaining certain behaviors, if you're a lawyer, a divorce lawyer who knows what they're doing, then you will recognize some of the traits of these mental health challenges. But oftentimes clients come in and they say, I've done research, or I know this for a fact, my spouse is a borderline or my spouse is a narcissist. And if that's the case, it really does change the dynamic of the entire divorce process. And one of the things that I kind of want to inform the listeners about is exactly what is borderline, how do you deal with that if you're divorcing a borderline, and what is narcissistic personality disorder, and how do you deal with that? Because I think those are really the two most prevalent challenges that exist out there, and things like gaslighting fall into those personality disorders.
Okay, let's break that down.
Okay, so let me start with borderline personality disorder, okay? Um, Borderline personality disorder is a mental health issue, and only a trained professional can properly diagnose a person with borderline personality disorder. And there's a certain, psychological manual that lists criteria that a person must have to conclude that they are, in fact, a borderline personality disorder. In the divorce arena, whether someone is diagnosed or not doesn't really matter, because if they have certain tendencies, a divorce can be very challenging.
Right.
And the tendencies that I think are important for the listeners to determine whether or not their spouse has borderline personality disorder or tendencies, is that they have intense anger and difficulty controlling their anger. They have erratic mood swings. Um, they have a pattern of unstable relationships, and they switch between either extremely admiring someone or extremely hating someone. So the idea of either you're with me or you're against me. There's no moderation. There's nothing in between. And they're very impulsive in areas such as spending, substance abuse, binge eating, driving, sexual behaviors. And those are the type of behaviors when clients describe that to me, I think to myself, this is going to be a challenging case, because whether or not this person is diagnosed with borderline, or whether or not these are just the tendencies they have, I know in my mind that this divorce will be challenging.
Right.
Right?
Well, I'm curious, 20 years ago, well, what did they describe this? I mean, how was this described?
I don't think that the word borderline personality disorder was bantered around as much as it is today. I
Right.
think people are much more educated now, for reasons that I won't really get into here, which are fairly obvious. But because the world is a more connected place, I think that people just generally are more knowledgeable about mental health issues.
Yeah.
And so people tend to recognize these behaviors a little bit more. And so it really is important that you sort of key in, because if you are divorcing a person with borderline, there are certain things that you need to do.
So let's talk about that. So let's assume that someone comes in your initial interview and they're describing their spouse and all of these items that you discussed: anger, mood swings, erratic behaviors, all emerge. And so you're thinking in your mind, oh, I know what I'm going to be dealing with.
Yeah.
What's the next steps? What are you preparing you and your client for?
Well, sometimes I'll have to get to know the client a little bit better to confirm my suspicions, unless the client and I are both in agreement that this is in existence. But
Right.
once that happens, certain things that can be done just to make the process a little bit more bearable. And I advise clients to limit communication. And unless the communication is really necessary about the schedule of the children or emergencies related to the children, don't communicate with this person. And the reason is because it's just not going to be productive, because you are now seen as their enemy once you start this divorce process. And the borderline personality just person is going to be reactive. They're going to insult you. They're going to threaten you. They're going to make unfair accusations against you. And the common reaction to that is to defend yourself. And that is only going to add fuel to the fire. So I typically want there to be parameters about communication. And so the second thing I say is limit communication to what's absolutely necessary. And if you must communicate, keep conversations very matter of fact, keep conversations concise, and keep conversations consistent. And again, if that approach is taken, in my experience, it limits the ability of the borderline to create issues, make things more chaotic. And it's really important to do that. It's so easy to get dragged in. It's such a natural reaction to want to defend yourself. Oftentimes I have a little saying. I say to my clients, ignore and delete, ignore and delete. So they're getting email after email after email. And I say to them, just ignore and delete it. There is nothing that you can respond that will be productive. And it's a really, really hard thing for clients to do when you're being accused of certain things.
We talked about this in a previous podcast about learning how to compartmentalize the divorce process, which is very hard. And it's probably even more so with someone that has this condition, because you're trying to be productive maybe in your work, or you're trying to keep things at bay with your kids, and you get a text or an email like this, and it can just trigger an emotion. And then all of a sudden, like Melissa said, you're defensive, and then all of a sudden, it ruins your day, and that feeds into your career and how you deal with family and friends and so forth.
Yeah, and with a borderline, because they're so angry and volatile and emotional, there's no rhyme or reason to a lot of the things that they're saying, and it really can impact you on a daily basis. And that's why I also say there should be a structure around the communication. And I oftentimes recommend that people use Our Family Wizard. OFW is a great resource for people who are divorcing in general, but in particular, if you're dealing with someone with a borderline personality, because it creates a structure around the communication. You're not hearing ping, 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 ping on your phone all the time.
Right.
You can sit down and look at your phone at dedicated points of time and read OFW. And the other great thing about OFW, and the advice that I give to people who are dealing with borderline personalities, is that communication should be in writing. And the reason it should be in writing is because it keeps the borderline personality on track. If you're communicating in person, they are going to be bringing up things from the past, anything to inflame the situation. So if you're communicating in writing, it keeps the conversation on track. You also have proof. So if the borderline says something later on that isn't true, or they don't remember it, then you can pull up OFW and you can say, see, this is what was said. And the third reason, and perhaps the most important reason that I suggest communication be in writing, is because aggressive or angry or threatening, you could just walk away, and it makes it easier.
Right.
We talked in detail in one of our interviews with the liaison for Our Family Wizard, and it was interesting because I wish that I said it's been around for 21 years, and I wish I would have known about it. Two of the key. There's so many things that you could do with Our Family Wizard, but two of them is the tone meter. So basically, I thought that was a brilliant, like, it says, oh, that's kind of aggressive, and it makes you stop yourself. And also the timestamp. So if you say, oh yeah, I was there, I was what, no, you really weren't, because here's the timestamp. So it kind of like stops a lot of that back and forth and he said, she said, and you really can't lie. So
Yeah.
I think a brilliant way, especially if you're dealing with somebody with borderline personality, especially.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And the last thing that I use, a piece of advice that I generally request my clients employ is that they should not give any extra attention to a spouse that has borderline personality. They thrive on that. They love it. And nothing productive is going to come from it. They love the drama of the divorce process. And that's one of the reasons it's so difficult to go through this process. Most people, who realize their marriage has broken down, want to get through the process as quickly and as reasonably as possible. It's a different story when you're dealing with someone who has borderline. And so it's really important that you only discuss important issues. No other attention is given because, again, it will just feed the flame.
This is really good advice because it's really hard to not take the bait because you really want to take the bait.
It really is. It's easy for me to say, it's easy advice, but it really is critical if you want to get through the process with as little hurt as possible.
Melissa, do the courts ever mandate that someone's diagnosed in a very abrasive divorce process where you're like, this is not moving forward because of the behaviors that this person's exhibiting? Is that ever mandated where the judge might say, we need to see what's going on here?
Yeah, sometimes there will be a psychological evaluation ordered by the court or agreed to by the parties. Because you have to understand, a borderline doesn't realize they have borderline.
Right,
so
right.
Sometimes they'll say, bring it on, I'm fine. And the big issue with borderline typically is if someone has borderline, it really, in the divorce arena, what's important is, does their mental health challenge impact their ability to parent or co-parent?
Right.
That really is the bottom line, and the real reason why a psychological evaluation would be ordered. And if someone is diagnosed with borderline, I can guarantee you it impacts their ability to at least co-parent.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that. How do you protect the kids when you're dealing with a borderline personality X?
It is not easy.
Because they're probably throwing them in the middle, aren't they?
They really are caught in the middle. But regardless, if a child has a parent with this mental health illness, then the courts might require, for example, if there's going to be access, that the parent have therapy on a consistent and regular basis, that there might be some sort of family therapy on a consistent and regular basis, just to make sure that the children are faring well and that the parent is appropriately parenting. So those are some, safeguards that can be used to make sure that the children's best interests are being protected.
What happens when someone gets supervised visitation, and when does that happen?
That usually happens if the children is at risk of harm. And that is sort of used to be a very easy term to understand, because it meant that a parent couldn't physically care for a child. But as time has progressed and mental health issues have become more developed in the divorce arena, there's a big question as what does that mean in the mental health arena? When is a child at risk of harm if their parent suffers from mental health challenges? And supervised visitation can be employed if a parent does suffer from certain mental health conditions to make sure that they are parenting the child appropriately. They can also work with parenting coaches so that they can learn appropriate parenting skills. But it is a very difficult challenge. So, and I also want to explain a little bit about narcissistic personality disorder, because that also, as Daniel said, it is a term that is bantered about quite a bit. I have many clients who come in and say that their spouse is a narcissist. And so I want to sort of explain to the listeners really what a narcissist is. And again, a narcissist is a mental health condition that really can only be diagnosed properly by a mental health professional who's qualified to do so. So certainly I'm not suggesting I am that person, but there is a something called the Diagnostic Statistic Manual that lists certain traits that someone must have in order for them to be diagnosed with narcissism. And that is grandiose behavior, which is really an unrealistic sense of superiority. They're very egocentric, and they lack empathy. So they struggle to connect emotionally with others. So those are the people, they don't have any friends. They have broken relationships with family members. Mm-hmm. And they have an obsessive need for admiration. And narcissists typically will go into a career where they're greatly admired. And they have a sense of self-importance, and they want to feel loved by others. So, and there's a saying that is used amongst divorce lawyers, and it says, and what we say is the only thing harder than being married to a narcissist is divorcing one. And
because they want to win, right? It's all about winning.
It can be really, really difficult, and narcissist, and this is sort of where the whole gaslighting arena comes in. That's a technique that narcissists typically use. So, I can talk to you about that, but I don't know if you have any questions about narcissists.
I do. Talk to us about lack of empathy. That's a behavior of a narcissist and how that carries into a divorce.
Well, if you have a lack.
We're going to talk about that, and we're going to get more into that right after this. We'll be right back. Our Family Wizard is a leading app for more peaceful co-parenting. It streamlines communication and helps you avoid conflicts about things like expenses and scheduling, which we all know are two areas that are full of contention for many co-parents. On Our Family Wizard, you can do things like handle schedule changes, pay child support, and even send messages, which, unlike texts and emails, can't be deleted or manipulated. Plus, you can control how you're notified when your co-parent messages you. No more angry texts from your ex hitting your phone screen out of the blue. It's easy to see why Our Family Wizard is the #1 co-parenting app trusted by more than 1 million parents and family law professionals. Learn more at ourfamilywizard.com today. We're back, and we're talking about extreme personalities and aggressive factors with attorney Melissa Needle of Needle Cuda Divorce and Family Law.
Yeah, we were talking, Wendy, a little bit about some of the characteristics of a narcissist, and I was just curious about the lack of empathy, because I would think if somebody already has that behavior, it's probably further magnified in the negotiation process of a divorce, right, Melissa?
That is spot on, Daniel. That's spot on. And when you're divorcing a narcissist, they play dirty and they have no remorse. Even if you want to be reasonable, they will not reciprocate that. They do not understand what you are feeling or what you are going through. And in fact, they don't understand what the kids are feeling or what they're going through. The only goal they have in mind is to win. That's the problem with divorcing a narcissist. I mean, I think I've said it many times. When you're getting divorced, there's no winners or losers.
Yep.
A narcissist does not see it that way, and that's what I mean when I say it's so difficult to divorce a narcissist because of their lack of empathy. They are not reasonable, and they have an inability to understand what others are feeling, and in particular, even the children.
And these narcissists, do they? I would assume that they pretend to be like this great co-parent and this great person in the public.
And that is exactly right. They come off as charming, charismatic, intelligent. They work so hard to convince lawyers and judges that they're the ones that have been wrong, that they're the best. They've tried incredibly hard. They will lie, they will exaggerate, they will smear their spouse. And I so often will have spouses come in and say, I'm so afraid. Everyone loves my spouse. Everyone thinks he's the greatest guy. You're going to think that I'm crazy for divorcing him. You're going to think I'm not telling the truth. And that is exactly where the gaslighting comes in, because gaslighting is exactly what narcissists do. They use that as a way to sort of control others. And gaslighting is another term that's bantered about quite a bit. So I want to give the listeners an example of gaslighting behaviors. Okay. So if gaslighting is saying when a spouse says they didn't do something, even in your head that they did it, even if you have proof that they did it, and you start to question yourself, is that really true? Because the narcissist is so incredibly convincing, you start questioning yourself. The narcissist will try to turn others against you. And that is a form of gaslighting. They will tell your siblings, your friends, your parents, whoever will listen, that you are the crazy one. And they might even expose something private.
Social media, right? On social media.
Yeah, on social media, or even if you, for example, had confided in your spouse that you had some issue when you were younger, they will expose that and use that against you.
They try to make you crazy.
Yeah, they will tell your loved ones that you are crazy. That is gaslighting. That is a classic type of gaslighting. They will tell blatant lies. And another type of gaslighting behavior that's fairly common is if a narcissist does something wrong, they then will try to woo you so that you don't think too poorly of them. They'll buy you a piece of jewelry. They'll take you on a vacation. They'll tell you how beautiful you are, that you're their soulmate. And they will do anything they have to so that you don't think poorly of them after they've done something really terrible.
Nasty to nice, huh?
Yes. And then, and so because of these extreme behaviors, when you're divorcing a narcissist, there is, you have to make a plan. You have to be smart when you're divorcing a narcissist. And if you don't, it could really end disaster. Because they will play the victim. They'll try to game the system. They'll present as this wonderful person. And so you have to be prepared. You have to have a plan. And you need to have a very skilled divorce lawyer if you sense that your spouse is a narcissist.
I was going to say, how do you help?
Don't you think the coaching isn't it similar if with the borderline? It's a lot of it is about communication too, because I would assume a narcissist, I mean, they're moving in a lot of different directions and working at lots of people, but you probably want to limit your communication.
Yes. So the advice that I give is never tell a narcissist your plans of divorce until you are absolutely ready to pull the trigger. Okay. Otherwise, they will try to sabotage your efforts and make life really, really difficult for you. So, there are occasions where two healthy people can have a productive, constructive conversation about ending a marriage and plans and goals. That is not the case with the narcissist, okay? So that's the first piece of advice that I typically give. I tell clients to save all communications and try to do everything in writing. Text messages, emails, write a contemporaneous journal. And the reason that I give that advice is because the narcissist is going to want to change the narrative. They are going to want to make it appear as if you are the crazy one. So having things in writing is good evidence that you are not losing it. You are being truthful. You have the right perception of what has transpired. Another piece of advice similar to borderline is do not fight back. Just don't do it. Maintain your composure. It will completely disarm a narcissist. If you do not engage, it will upset them. They love the fight, a narcissist. That is what is feeding their ego. One of the primary issues in divorcing a narcissist is because this is about winning and losing for them, the settlement is very, very challenging. And so they like to delay the case for as long as possible. This is feeding their ego. They love the drama of the divorce process. They love being in court, sitting in the witness stand, having everyone pay attention to them. It is really, really hard to resolve a case with a narcissist, and you have to be prepared for that. You just do. And you have to know that going in so that your strategy is appropriate to get the goals that you're looking to achieve.
It seems like it's almost like a stage for them.
That's exactly it. That's what a narcissist loves. And they love this process. They say, bring it on. Whereas most people are drained by it, recognize that it's hard on everyone, that it can have long-term negative effects on family and children. A narcissist does not have that switch. So I often tell clients, and this is a critical piece, it's not really legal, but you have to have really good support. Make sure that your support system is in place and that they are there for you, because it's going to be a long, difficult process. And the last thing that I generally tell people, similar to borderline, is set boundaries.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll even suggest that clients block a narcissist on digital devices, and again, use OFW only to communicate. It's a platform I mean, for many reasons, I know that you have done a show on OFW, but OFW is terrific when you're dealing with narcissists because all of the communications can easily be accessed in a very organized way. And again, it allows you to walk away. And if you don't want to engage, you could say, this is becoming too aggressive, I'm done, and walk away. So the boundaries are very important with a narcissist.
On top of going through the divorce process, it's emotionally and mentally exhausting if you
Right.
have this kind of an ex. I think that this is such an important topic, Melissa, and for you to share your advice, because some attorneys might not give this kind of advice and might not share this with their client on how to deal with this. So
Yeah, if you were I think that if you were divorcing someone who has either a borderline or narcissist personality, whether it's diagnosed or they just have these traits or tendencies, my advice would be to find a divorce lawyer who has experience and skills in these types of situations, because it really makes a difficult process as another whole layer to it. I think that's really important for the listeners to hear.
Melissa, how do you handle it when your client is the narcissist or has the personality disorder?
It's really hard to work with someone who has these types of personality disorders because they don't want to listen. They
Right.
don't want to take your advice. Because either they think they know best, they love the drama, they don't want to resolve cases, they don't listen to my advice, they don't listen to court orders. So oftentimes, if someone has strong traits like this, I will not represent them because
Yeah.
I'm not doing them a service. I get involved in cases so that I can guide my clients through difficult time. And if they're not listening to me or taking my advice, then it's not a good fit.
And as the personality disorder may be a little bit easier to identify, but the narcissists are sneaky, and so it's really hard to figure that out because they're always trying to give this perception to the people that they encounter, whether it's at work or relationships, that they're perfect and they're always in the right. So that's a hard one to size up.
It is, but usually if you live with a narcissist,
You
you know.
know, right? Yeah.
And so a lot of people say they live with a narcissist or just say I'm married to a narcissist. But then when you start to hear the stories as someone who's experienced in what a narcissist is like, then you can confirm whether
Yeah.
or not the your client's description is accurate.
That's a great point.
this is a lot of information here today, Melissa. I think so helpful for people out
Yeah,
there.
and I know I talked a lot, but there's just so much here, and
No,
I wanted
there
to
is.
make sure that I fit it all in for the listeners because it really is something that is so important to know and deal with, and make sure that you really are with the right lawyer so that you can navigate quickly and as painlessly as possible when you're dealing with someone with one of these traits.
That's tough stuff.
It
Tough
is tough.
stuff there, right? Any
It is.
last minute thoughts, Melissa?
Any last thoughts? If you do feel that you're married to someone who has either borderline or narcissism, you can get through it. I've divorced many clients who are married to spouses with these conditions. It is doable. You're not helpless or hopeless. You just have to have your expectations managed and look for a good lawyer to get you through the process. Make sure you have lots of family and friends to support you.
All good advice. Up next, we're going to be talking about preparing your depositions. What are depositions? Who needs them and why? And good witnesses versus bad witnesses and building the narrative for that. That's a really interesting topic. That's going to be next with attorney Melissa Needle of Needle Cuda Divorce and Family Law. Such a good topic today. Once again, thank you for shedding light on this and sharing your advice.
Thank you for having me.
Guidance that moves lives forward.